Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. We are back with a brand new episode. It may still feel like winter outside, but there's plenty to do in order to get the garden ready. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, we start out by looking at the calendar to plan our garden. I begin sowing some transplant seeds. And then, if you haven't taken down your Christmas decorations yet, you aren't the only one.
We're back with a brand new year, and you probably have a new calendar that you've acquired for 2023. Now, a lot of times we might like to think that we live spur of the moment, but our calendars sometimes can rule our lives. And mine's no different, but today we're going to talk about how we can use our calendar for our garden. So another thing you probably are getting in the mail right now are a lot of seed and plant catalogs. It's always a fun time of year to get those colorful catalogs in the mail and start dreaming about our spring garden. And so today we're going to talk about how to use our calendar to figure out and plan for our spring garden. Now there's two things you got to consider first, and that's whether you're going to plant cool or warm season crops. Basically, there's two different types of vegetables, cool and warm season. And so as the name implies, cool season crops are those vegetables that like to grow in cooler conditions. And so those are the ones that we can start planting sooner. Now, warm season crops like to grow in warmer temperatures, and we'll talk about those in a minute here. So let's first look at cool season crops. So typically you can plant your cool season crops out in the garden anywhere from February 15th to March 15th. You have a bit of a window there. Now, some cool season crops you can directly sow straight out into the garden. So that means the seeds that you can get, such as lettuce, carrots, radishes, those can go straight out into the garden. So for right now, we're just going to go ahead and find those seeds and set them aside until we're ready to plant those out in the garden. And the thing you might want to think about is you might plant some maybe February, mid-February, late February, and then into March also, so you can kind of got some succession planting. And you never know in Oklahoma, if we have a really bad winter storm, you still got that window to go ahead and replant some directly out in the garden. Now, there are some other cool season crops that you are going to want to plant transplants out in the garden during that time period of mid-February to mid-March. And the reason why you want to plant transplants is because it gives those plants a faster start out in the garden so that we can actually get our produce off of them before our summer temperatures begin to warm up. And so some examples of those cool season crops that do best by transplants are broccoli, cauliflower, head lettuce. And what you're going to do on those is go ahead and start transplants. Now, you will find in nurseries, plant nurseries, that there's plenty of transplants available if you choose to just go ahead and go to the nursery and buy your transplants. By all means, that's a great option if you want to do that. For some people, however, you might want to consider growing your own transplants. Growing your own transplants offers you a more opportunity to grow different varieties because you can go online and order a lot of different seeds that maybe aren't available in your plant nurseries. Also, it allows you to kind of control the health of those plants, the size of those transplants by doing it yourself. The other big thing is it's just more economical because for a few dollars you can get several seeds, meaning several plants, versus a few dollars for one plant. So think about that as well. So if you want to start your own transplants, then we need to start thinking about those transplants sooner than your planting date. So that means we need to look at our calendar and back up a few weeks. most of your cool season transplants need to be planted about 5 to 7 weeks prior to the date that they're going to be planted out in the garden. If our range is mid-February to mid-March, we need to look at our calendar and count backwards from the date we hope to plant the transplants outside. Let's assume we want to plant our cool season crop by March 15th. We will then count back 5 weeks from there, and you can see we need to sow our seeds by February 8th. If you're wanting to have your transplants growing earlier in the garden, say by February 15th, then you could start your transplants as soon as January 11th. So ideally, your range for starting your cool season crops transplants indoors would be from January 11th to February 8th. Now, of course, this is just a general range and it's a little bit flexible. And when you start your transplants indoors, there's a lot of factors to consider, including moisture and light and also heat. And so when you're starting those, all those factors can kind of play into the health of your transplants and how quickly they will germinate and grow for you. So there is some flexibility in that. And again, you can also start several sessions of transplants as well. So you could start some on January 18th and then start some later in February as well if you wanted to do that. So now let's talk about warm season crops. Well, when does cool season change to warm season? A general rule in Oklahoma is the date of April 15th. That's right, tax day. I always joke with people, go pay your taxes and then you can go play in the garden and start planting your peppers and tomatoes. But really, that date is just an average for our last freeze date in Oklahoma. So as we approach April 15th, you can start looking at that forecast and see whether there's any potential frost or freezes in the forecast. And it might be that you could plant a little sooner, or maybe you need to wait a little bit later. Obviously, this will vary a little bit depending on your specific location in Oklahoma. If you're further south, you could plant a little sooner. If you're further north, you might wait a little bit longer. So there is some variability in that date of April 15th as well. It is just a good date and an easy date to remember. So when we talk about April 15th, switching to warm season crops, that is the date that we can start planting our warm season vegetables outdoors. So that means tomatoes, peppers, and all of those great crops that we love to have in our garden. Now, again, just like cool season crops, there are warm season crops that you can directly sow out into the garden, such as your corn and your okra and things like that. So for those seeds, we're just going to set those aside and not worry about them until April. There are some warm season crops, however, that you want to go ahead and start growing your transplants for them as well if you're choosing to grow your own transplants. Now, the first ones that you want to consider growing are your eggplants and your peppers because they need the most amount of time, usually 6 to 8 weeks. So again, using our calendar, if we wanted to plant on April 15th, we would need to count back a minimum of 6 weeks and find that we can sow our seeds indoors by March 4th. However, you can sow those seeds as soon as February 18th as well. Now, tomatoes is the next big warm season crop that needs to be planted outdoors as a transplant. And in order to grow those transplants, they need 5 to 7 weeks. So the window for starting tomato plants would be February 25th through March 11th. And really, you want to plant some of your warm season crops as transplants for the same reason that you're planting some of your cool season crops as transplants, and that's to give them a head start. So if we were to plant tomatoes as seeds directly out into the garden on February 15th, what's going to happen is they probably would germinate and grow for you, but by the time they get large enough to actually flower and start producing, our summer temperatures are going to be too hot, and that would really reduce your produce that you're going to get off of it. So you probably have had a rogue tomato that might have done that in your compost pile or your previous tomato garden area. But that's really why, if you're looking at starting tomatoes, peppers, or eggplants, you want to start those with transplants on April 15th. Whether you start those transplants yourself Or again, go to the nursery. They often have several transplants available. Now, be forewarned though, a little bit. You will find that those transplants are for sale at your local nursery well in advance of that April 15th. So again, keeping in mind whether your forecast allows you to plant a little bit sooner or your location further south might allow you to plant a little bit sooner. But sometimes they're out there way too soon and you really shouldn't be planting them just yet. So be mindful of your forecast and also what you're planting in your garden, and use your calendar to figure out when to get those transplants started. It's not too late to start transplants. So if you want to start your transplants, go ahead and go get those seeds quickly. You can start both your cool season crops and your warm season crops still. So today we're looking at how to do that, and we've got some of those seeds pulled. So we've got some different pak choi, also some cauliflower, as well as some peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants that we're going to start. Now, it's pretty simple. What you're going to want to do though is make sure that you have some trays or some flats and some good loose potting soil. The thing about starting transplants indoors is that you have to provide everything that nature normally would provide outdoors in order to get those seeds to germinate. And of course, we're doing this earlier in the season, so we need to supplement with light and moisture and also some warmth. So you can see I've got some trays here of potting soil. It's a nice loose mix so that the seed will easily be able to take root and allow that sprout to start coming up through that potting soil. You definitely don't want to substitute and use topsoil at all. That's just too heavy of a media to use. The other thing you do want to do before you actually start breaking open your seed packets is to go ahead and fill your trays and also to moisten that potting soil, because it can take a little while to get it actually saturated. And so to do that after you plant the seed, you run the risk of actually washing away your seed. So you can see ours are already watered down. We've saturated them. So now we know they're nice and moist, and we can go ahead and plant our seeds in there. So I'm just going to start with some, let's see what we have here, some cauliflower. This particular variety is called cheddar. It's kind of a yellow cauliflower, so we're kind of anxious to see how this is going to look out in the garden and also taste. Now, when you're planting your transplants, you might always read the label. A lot of times there's some very valuable information that is specific to the variety that you're planting. So make sure to check that out. A lot of times seeds might need specific conditions like soaking the seeds overnight prior to planting. So you want to make sure to follow any directions that are specific to what you are planting. Now you can see the seeds are actually very tiny. And so what we're going to do is just plant about one seed per hole so that we make sure to take advantage of all of these seeds. You can use a pencil to put a hole in there, and we're just going to go about 1/4 of an inch down because these are such small seeds. And we're only going to sow about a 6-pack per plant that we have here. You can use a pencil or a dibble. This is a dibble that you can simply just press down and make holes in your potting soil that way. We actually built these a few years ago, so if you want to check that out. So we've got our seeds here, and we're just going to drop one seed in there. Now, if you're working with some old seeds that maybe you have had from previous years, what you might want to consider doing is planting a couple of seeds in each hole just to make sure that you've got some germination, because those seeds might not be quite at the germination rate that newer seeds would be at. Now, we've got those in there. I'm going to make sure and label this too before I move on to the next one. If you have plant tags, a lot of times pencil works really well, more than ink, because ink can fade in the UV light. So we're just going to make sure that we label this as well as put the date on here. You want to make sure you're putting the date when you are starting these so that we can know when to anticipate them germinating and also planting them out in the garden. Now, in addition to temperature, you also want to think about the humidity that you're going to provide to your seedlings or to the seeds so that they can germinate. And we have ours placed here on a mist bench. So these misters are going to provide intermittent moisture, about 4 seconds of mist every 10 to 15 minutes. And so that will keep these nice and moist as they continue to grow. Obviously, this is a little bit more of a production scale. So if you're in a home situation, there is a way to recreate that. So they offer different kits that you can purchase. And this is a nice tray that I really like. So our traditional tray that we've got, I still need to plant up here, but it fits nicely in this. So you don't have to worry about any moisture getting on your table or anything like that. The other thing is that you can then get a grow light like this and just place it over so that we make sure to provide our seedlings plenty of light. This comes on a chain, so as our seedlings start growing, we can actually pull that light up. You want to provide that light really close, because if you start noticing, if your light was like up here, your seedlings are going to start to stretch. Or if you don't provide them with adequate light and just put them in a sunny window, you might notice that your seedlings are stretching a little bit. So provide them with plenty of light. Now, in order to keep that moisture, like I was saying, something like this, you can place this over your container here, and this is going to keep that moisture in on those. What you might do is just get a simple mist bottle and spray this every so often to keep that humidity up in there. It also, a lot of times these things have vents, so you can kind of vent them as well. The thing to be cautious of is these can get hot, especially if they are in a bright sunny window. Be careful of that, because you're creating a greenhouse effect. So seedlings can get too hot, which will also be detrimental to them as well. When you have this sort of a situation, you want to make sure to keep checking them pretty often for both the humidity and the moisture, but also be on the lookout for those green sprouts, because it won't take long for your seeds to germinate. After Christmas, a lot of times we get distracted and forget about taking down our Christmas ornaments and items and start thinking about planting seeds. But before we do any of that, we are out visiting with Dr. Whitcomb, who still has some Christmas lights hanging up. Dr. Whitcomb, you've got a problem that a lot of us are facing. Tell us a little bit about how you're managing the deer population and the damage.
Yeah, the deer population is going nuts. Just up because of the elimination of the screwworm fly.
Okay.
That was affecting not only livestock, but deer as well.
Yes. Well,
they've become such a nuisance out here that one of the ideas that occurred to me 2 years ago is taking solar-powered Christmas lights and putting them out in the field to deter the deer. Deer become so attuned to a constant light, a constant sound or something, that they soon just ignore it. The lights are solar powered, so I don't have to fool with batteries or anything. How long they'll last, I don't know. But some of these are 2 years old and still work beautifully. But there's several different settings you can use, but the one that I like, it says flashing in waves, slow, sequential, twinkle flash, steady on, and then slow glow. But
so they're all doing different things at different times?
I have 4 strands of lights out here to protect Rose of Sharon plants that the deer just devastate. But by having 4 of these, when this series is doing blink, 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 another series is doing blink, 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 or maybe is off for a little bit. But the fact that, and it takes them 8 minutes to do this whole sequence. So I've never noticed them doing the same thing. There's 8 minutes is enough, and then Oh, they will do all blue lights and then all red lights. It looks like Las Vegas out here at night.
And you don't have these on every row, right?
No,
you just
right,
have it because you have thousands of plants out here
Yeah.
you're trying to protect.
What I started out 2 years ago to protect, I've got about 12,000 Rose of Sharon plants out there. And yeah, the ones I planted in 20 and 21, we didn't get a flower. The new growth would come out and it'd be grazed off within a day. And this has stopped that.
Okay.
Very effectively, pretty inexpensively.
So you have them strung up over your head even, so they're fairly high up. Is there a purpose for them being high other than the plants?
Well, it is, because the plants operate on a 4-year cycle. If a plant hasn't shown me something good, they go in the burn pile, okay? And so by the time the 4 years old, they will be up here 4 to 5 feet tall.
Okay.
So I've got them set up here to where these plants can get up high enough in their normal growth cycle, and the lights will still be above. I think higher is better than lower.
Right.
The effect of the light laterally is difficult to say for sure, but all these rows are on 10-foot centers. I've got a string of lights in row 6, a row and a string in row 20, and there's no feeding in between. The only time I've seen feeding since I've had these out here in the field was last summer, when it was so hot and so dry and there was so little vegetation,
right,
that they started nibbling on the ends of the rows furthest away from the lights.
Because of course you're irrigating here, so there's green vegetation for them to come in and get here.
Drip irrigation's wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And it was providing green new growth, but
so now deer have another issue with our garden. Not only do they eat on them, but just during rut, the rubbing that they can do. You've got a solution for that too?
Well,
another Christmas item? You
know, the old thing that's been around for a long time has been to use various soaps.
Right.
I've used Irish Spring effectively, and there's a couple of other brands that are particularly odoriferous. And I just cut this one in a piece. What I do, if I just want to protect an individual plant, I'll take a bar of soap, drill holes through it, and then cut it into 6 pieces. So I've got a hole to tie it with, or use a piece of wire, and that will last for months. It's a big enough chunk to really be effective of this Irish Spring. But even that doesn't deter rutting. The rutting is a different phenomenon from grazing. But the thing that I am now doing that looks like it's going to be very effective, and it has been this year, again, going back to the Christmas ornaments, something makes noise.
A jingle bell. Yeah.
One of them did fair when I put 3 on a tree, to where they would bump one another. The sound isn't the same if 3 bells are hitting one another than if just 1 bell. But when they go to rub on the tree, you get this sound that otherwise isn't there. That becomes a deterrent, and this has been effective. So again, and you could leave these up there the year round if you weren't offended by the appearance, but.
And so clearly this isn't a solution for every one of your plants, but when you're noticing something is getting damaged, you go and...
This only provides for an individual plant. Just like the soap only provides for an individual plant as far as the grazing goes.
Well, if you haven't taken down your Christmas lights, you are in good company. And it might be that you have a solution to the deer problem in your garden also. Dr. Whitcomb, thank you so much for sharing this creative solution with us.
You're welcome. Give it a try. Little to lose, and you can lighten up your whole garden.
Absolutely. Thank you.
There are a lot of great horticulture activities this time of year. Be sure and consider some of these events in the weeks ahead. We'll be back next week with another new Oklahoma gardening as we take advantage of the warm winter days to check in on some plants in the garden. To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Tulsa Garden Center at Woodward Park, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, Smart Pot, and the Tulsa Garden Club.